This is Andy Purewal for ID Boxing. I'm joined by former British heavyweight David Price over Zoom. David, firstly, how's life? How are you?
Good, Andy. Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me, mate. All
Nice.
good.
I always appreciate you stopping by and giving up some time. And obviously, a big fight to reflect on from the past weekend. We saw Joe Joyce defeated. You saw him stopped by Zhang Zhilei at the Copper Box Arena. It wasn't a result many would have tipped, especially in the fashion that it came about. Just wanted your initial reactions to what we saw this past weekend.
Yeah, pretty much the same as everyone else, really. I mean, anyone who's seen my interviews with you on here, they know I'm a big Joe Joyce fan. He's my favourite heavyweight, current heavyweight, Joe Joyce. Let's put the fight on. So I was gutted really for him, and as a fan, just shocked. But it weren't the writing was on the wall, wasn't it? After a few rounds, you could see what was going to happen. It weren't like it was a like my first defeat when I got stopped in the second round, or when Amir Khan got knocked out by Brady's Prescott in the first round. It didn't have that massive shock element to it when the fight got waved off, because the writing was on the wall. But still, because you had a bit of time to digest what was about to happen, because Zhang just couldn't miss really. And although I am a fan of Joyce, I thought he looked awful from the way it go on Saturday night. Everything just looked out of sync. His coordination weren't there with his feet. Everything just looked awkward. And I have said in the past, Joyce isn't the easiest on the eye boxing style wise, but he's so effective, and that was part of his, or is part of his strength, is that he's unconventional in the way he fights, and it can be a little bit more difficult to read, especially for someone theoretically like Zhang, who's an Olympic fighter. Textbook, typical. He would be a typical textbook boxer. Uh, Zhilei Zhang, upright, southpaw, nice, crisp, straight punches. But he dealt with it, no problem. He couldn't miss at all. And forget about Joe Joyce's performance. What a performance by the winner on Saturday night. Fantastic from the way it go. He went in there confident. Everyone was expecting him to be beaten quite convincingly. And, he's 39. He's been in the game a long time. He's at the same Olympics as me, won a silver medal. And he's just persevered. And it's been like a bit of a slow burner to this point. And then his last fight, thought he was unlucky to lose. So, he's, you could say he's unbeaten. If his last fight was to be looking at, say, who did you think won? It was a fight that maybe Joe Joyce didn't need at this time. But when you're doing things what Joe Joyce is doing, you don't look at someone like Zhang and go, "Oh, I'll avoid him." You just think you're going to walk through everyone and destroy them. And I was watching it, and part of me did think, and I did say, going into this fight, probably he's at a point now where all he thinks he has to do is turn up and just throw punches and let his hands go, and he's going to win. But that granite chin doesn't stop the rest of his face from being busted up by an accurate, well-schooled, good time and puncher. And that's what he come across on Saturday night. So, it's a tough bit of pill for him to swallow, but he's got to take his medicine. And the better man won on the night, and Styles made fights. He was just completely wrong for Joe Joyce.
There's also a few things to dissect from that, David, and just to reflect on Joe's performance and from what you've just said there. Do you feel like he's reached the point in his career then where there's this sense of he knows what in his mind, he knows that his chin could hold up or will hold up most of the time, whereby he can just walk forwards and in his head, eventually he'll get to his guy.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it becomes like a bit of a double-edged sword, doesn't it? Because his engine and his toughness, well, his chin, his ability to take a big punch without being knocked out or knocked down or whatever, and his engine. There is two main strengths, but the former, the toughness thing, the great chin, and that is also a weakness in its own right, because he thinks he can just take anyone's punch and it'll just bounce off them. I mean, I've seen his quote before the fight, and it was funny about everyone has a plan until they punch me in the face and nothing happens. I thought that was dead funny, but it come back to bite him because he's human at the end of the day. He's just skin and bones. He's flesh, skin and bones, and he bruises like the rest of us. And that's what happened to his eyes. His face just got buffed up from the way it going. You can only get away with that for so long. And I'm eating a bit of humble pie here because I just didn't see hardly anyone who'd be able to beat him. And this is just like come both from the blue, and humanised him to a degree, and probably made other fighters now go, well, I'll have a go with that. He's a bit of a one-trick pony, and that's maybe what people are starting to think.
I spoke to Richie Woodall after the fight. Richie obviously spent some time with Joe when he was on GB, and he said himself like he was just shocked by how poor Joe's tactics were and how he couldn't change anything during the fight. He was just the same thing kept happening. He just kept getting hit by that left hand, and Joe would have spent years, especially as an amateur, boxing against southpaws, boxing against the best fighters in the world. How much of a surprise is it to you that Joe seemed to struggle so much against a southpaw fighter last night?
Yeah, the southpaw thing was never an issue in my mind for him, but I did hear the commentary say it's his first southpaw since 2018 when he beat Lenroy Thomas. Now, with him only having fought one southpaw, you can pretty much be sure he won't spar many at all. And it was that long ago when he was in the Olympics and boxing as an amateur. Now it was 7, 8 years ago. You do need to freshen things up. I know it's only we've had sparring for this fight, but um, it shouldn't have been a bigger factor though as it was on Saturday night. Straight away, I mean, what I was talking about is movement. He was stepping to his right straight away from the first round, and it was the stepping. I looked and I thought he looked so clumsy, but he can do anyway. But it looked like it was almost having to think about it too much, without it being just second nature, where you've repeated it in the gym time after time, that it just happens. It was like it was an effort to step to his right, when in reality, stepping to his right weren't the thing he wanted to be doing against a southpaw with that left hand. That's like an arrow, wasn't it? It was like a javelin, straight left hand, straight down the pipe. At times, it was like a stiff prod, that left hand, but it was enough to just do that eye. So yeah, as far as the tactics were concerned, Joe Joyce was maybe thinking, come in light, get him tired, beat him down the stretch, but straight away he didn't put that to use by moving enough for a start. He was just sitting duck. Yeah, it just all went wrong for him.
Going into the fight on the back of the weigh-in, rather, there was talk about Joe's weight. Joe came in 15 pounds lighter than what he was for the Joe Parker fight. You had people thinking maybe he'll be a little bit lighter on his feet. We might see him moving a little bit more around the ring. Obviously, that didn't prove to materialise. Is it too much for people to look into the weight, thinking that could have affected Joe's performance, or do you think that he made a mistake by coming in so much lighter than what we've seen previously?
It depends what the reason behind him coming in light was. I mean, I know we spoke briefly on the phone, and my opinion is if you're as big and as heavy as we are, heavyweights, the big super heavyweights, you're near 19 and a half stone, whatever, dropping a £10 between fights, it's not unheard of. It shouldn't have that much of a big impact. Why he done it might be a big excuse for why he came to us. So if he's overtrained, then and that's why he's ended up losing so much weight, then that answers a lot. That explains a hell of a lot. But if it's just down to doing it for aesthetic reasons, to want to look more chiseled or ripped or whatever to fight, I can't see that. He's a pro. He's got a good team around him. I don't think it's that. If he's changed the diet, why? Why would you change? Why would you fix something that isn't broken? I mean, I can't think of a valid reason why you'd perform the way you did against Joe Parker, because I thought he was excellent in that fight. Everyone did it. He really arrived that night. Why would you want to come in so much lighter than your career best performance? I don't think the common sense part of it is that, would you do that on purpose? I don't think he has. I might be wrong. Was he sick? What? I don't know. Only he knows why he's come in so light. But yeah, I think the weight difference on the night did have a part to play. Only because of the size and how solid Zhang was. It was like a bit of an immovable object. And now for Joe Joyce to have someone in front of him like that, it's alien to him, because he's normally the big man, the juggernaut. He bulldozes people over, and he couldn't really move. Zhang, he's nearly 20 stone, but he was fighting fit, obviously, and he dealt with it no problem. Didn't see me Zhang once, and he was just holding his feet, letting him let his shots go. And he just weren't. He was like a bit of an immovable object, and so I think if we can discover why he was so much lighter, then you'd know if that's been a big impact. But he could have probably done with being heavier just because of the size of that opponent, because he couldn't move him.
David, we know there's a rematch clause in place there as well. If you was Joe, or if you was to have a chat and maybe offer him some advice, what would you say to him? Do you think it'd be wise to take it immediately?
Yeah, the thing is with rematches, it's always the quickest route to redemption. And as a fighter, you wanna redeem yourself instantly. And the frustrating thing about boxing is, especially with the injuries got on his eye, you have to wait months and months and months to be able to try and do that if you're lucky enough to have the opportunity. But sometimes you've got to listen to you've got to let your head rule your heart. Now, I just don't think Zhang is the right opponent for Joe Joyce to fight at any time. I think he's likely beat Joe Joyce 9 times out of 10, and that's just styles make fights. I think he's tailor-made for Zhang, and he's all wrong. So my advice would be, don't do it. But he's not really in a great position now. Where does he go if he doesn't redeem himself? Where does he go? Because none of the champions are going to handpick Joe Joyce, because he presents problems big time. Look, he didn't get knocked out last night. He got beat up, in realistic terms, and the injury done him. But he still carries that threat, and I don't think any champions will be voluntarily wanting to be fighting him. So it's not like he wants to go back down a level. He does belong at world level. So because of his age and everything else, I'd advise him to try and avoid the Zhang rematch. But I'd also understand if he wanted to do it. But if it was me, in my experience, I'd say, right, let's forget about that. Let's fight, I don't know, Dillian White, try and get a big domestic fight and go from there, and try and climb back up the rankings.
Obviously, we know Dillian was there last night before the fight. He did a couple of interviews suggesting that he'd love to face Joe and he'd like that fight because of where he currently sits. But just sticking with Joe, then, would you say to him to avoid the Zhang fight completely, or would you say maybe you need 1 or 2 fights under your belt, get some confidence back, get the win back beneath you before revisiting it?
I just avoid it completely. I just avoid it completely. I mean, look, I thought he battered Zhang. I said it to you the other week. I said he won't be able to miss, but it was the other way around. So I got my eye wiped as well as Joe did, pardon the pun. But styles make fights, and I just don't see how, at his age, he can change enough to be able to deal with that southpaw style. You know, sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away. And again, I've said it before, it's not who you fight in boxing, it's who you avoid. And he was the man to avoid. But, you know, he fooled us. And you know, going off the Ergovic fight, people probably thought, okay, he beat Ergovic, but Joe Joyce would beat the two of them on the same night. People probably thought, but heavyweight boxing always springs up surprises. But he looked really good, really good. He's going to cause trouble for anyone, problems for anyone. You know, yeah, it's big decisions have got to be made by Joyce and his team.
I don't know whether you would have had a chance to catch it at all earlier on in the night, but did you see the young prodigious talent of Moses Itauma at all, David?
I've seen a few highlights of him, but I've been following him. I've been following him since he was an amateur because as soon as I seen that he'd won a gold in the European Juniors, I took notice because I boxed in the European Juniors in 2001, years and years ago, but the level of competition at them tournaments is very, very high. Like, you know, there's fighters there who are better than a lot of pros on the domestic circuit, and I'm talking juniors, pros on the domestic circuit. You just never hear of these kids from Eastern Europe because they'll never turn pro or whatever. But the level of competition's high, and he won a gold, stopped all his opponents. Same in the world, stopped all his opponents. I think you've got to take notice of someone like that. So I started watching him, following his career, but he's going to be definitely big name in the future. He's going to be one to watch. I just read he won on points, which will do the world of good, because he just knocked two fellas over within a minute combined in his first two fights. So yeah, keep a close eye on him. He seems to have everything. He's not the biggest of heavyweights, which you know, he's not a giant, but you don't necessarily have to be, despite the last 10, 15, 20 years. It has been the dominant heavyweights have been them men, but there is always room for a smaller, more compact heavyweight to cause their own problems. So yeah, he's going to be in a good one to follow.
David, moving forwards, or well, backwards technically, obviously a couple of weeks back, we saw the return of Anthony Joshua. He went the distance with Jermaine Franklin before the fight. A lot of people felt we might see the AJ of old return. We might see him produce a bit of a conclusive stoppage victory. What did you make of what we did see in the ring?
I just seen someone who is questioning himself and overthinking what he's doing. And I've said that before about Anthony Joshua. He's quite the perfectionist, and you can just see his confidence is not completely gone, but it isn't half of what it should be. Because look, I seen what he was doing, and I recognised it because I done the same thing when my confidence, you know, I was like, he's a shell of himself, and he shouldn't have been, because his last fight before that against Usman, he performed brilliantly. So he's obviously been too hard on himself for the second Yusuf loss, because that was he was unlucky in that fight. That Yusuf just had that extra bit in the well towards the end to run away with the fight. Because he could have took that fight. But he's obviously been hammering himself over it and questioning himself. And I don't know why. I don't know why. He didn't need to. And he could have just got in that ring and just trusted himself to perform the way he knows he can and the way he's proved he can. But yeah, it wasn't great to watch, to be honest. It was a bit not sad to watch, but it was just a bit like it was a bit of an anticlimax. I was expecting to just wipe the floor with Franklin, but Franklin made things difficult for him. He was constantly moving, constantly threatening. he come in a lot lighter than the Dillian White fight, and you could see that because he was just busy. But it was when the punches were getting thrown at Joshua, you could see the lack of confidence and the fear of failure. He was terrified to lose again, and that's just going to hold him back. So yeah, that's what I took from that. Massively lacking the confidence what he once had.
It's a very interesting point that you made there, David, because it's something which I was going to ask you about. If you saw a fighter in AJ who's a bit more concerned or worried about what's coming back at him rather than focusing on his own work and, as you say, believing in what he can do. When you reach that point, David, when you step between the ropes and maybe, as you say, you feel like AJ didn't have that confidence we've seen in him previously, because it's been something which has been spoken about for a few fights now, is it possible to get it back, or at this stage of his career, is it a tough ask to get that back into you?
It's fucking hard, because look, at that one point, I felt I was getting in the ring and winning fights before I got in the ring when I was like really coming through flying. But once you lose that aura, and Vladimir Klitschko has said this, he said, once you lose that aura that you've got of invincibility or a wrecking ball or whatever, it's very, very hard to get it back. Very hard to get it back. And Joshua lost that in the first Rubens fight because people seen his vulnerabilities and went, oh, my God, I could do that to him. And what doesn't help is being very critical and of yourself and being a perfectionist and not being satisfied ever. And I think he's that guy. He's never satisfied. And sometimes you've got to sit back and give yourself a little bit of credit, give yourself a break, and let go of that fear of not being perfect, because no one ever is. No one ever is. You're only human. So yeah, it's difficult to get it back. Klitschko got his back, but he got his back in a different way. He just like mastered his style and broke people down over a longer period of time. But he did break them down. And Klitschko had that fear of getting it. He always used to jab and grab. Big men can be hurt, and when you've been knocked out, you don't want it to happen again, and your instinct is to do anything to avoid that. But he had his style down to a T, whereas AJ still doesn't look like he knows what he wants to be. What are you? You're a stand-up boxer. You're all right. Yeah, you're a box fighter, but sometimes you've got to identify what your A side is, and if it's keeping it long, winning on points, and it looks like he's lost between two different things. Yeah, it's frustrating to watch because I've been here myself on a lesser level, and I'm watching it and I'm like, I can see what's happening. I can see what's happening, but it's going to be even worse next time because he didn't perform half as good in that fight as he did against Usyk. So how's it going to be after this? Do you know what I mean? If his confidence was low after the Usyk fight, even though he's won this one, and he's like the fighter or the man who everyone once loved, and now everyone's questioning him, and it's difficult. It'd be difficult for him to stomach that. He's gone from being the golden boy to now, he's like the not an outcast, but he's definitely not the golden boy he once was, and sometimes the ego doesn't like that. So he's fighting that. He's fighting the perfectionist in himself and the fear of failure, and he's fighting wants to prove everyone wrong. And there's a lot going on for him, and I just hope he can come through and find a bit of the form that he once had.
I mean, the hope was this year that we would see a more active Anthony Joshua, and that certainly seemed to be the plan from what was discussed. And then I think it's only a matter of days after the fight, he put out over social media he won't return until December. We'll come on to what's come up in terms of a potential four-man tournament towards December, but if he was to only fight once more this year, that he's at the back end, is that a concern as well? Because it doesn't allow him to continue to work with Derek James, get another performance under his belt, just try and show like some form of improvements along the way.
It depends again what the reason behind it is. Is it money? You know, I've read a couple of different things. I've read something about the zone not being able to afford to pay him for 3 fights in the year. I've read that. I don't know how true that is. Also read that Derek James weren't happy with his performance and wants more time in the gym with him. But only they know the reason why they're waiting until December. So what is it now? April? Yeah. So what? That's 8 months. 8 months. Yeah, he needed to fight. He needed to fight in July, definitely, or August at the latest, just to get that momentum going. You know, make winning a normality again. You know, we spoke last time that get that winning feeling back. He's won that fight, but it won't feel like a victory to him. He won't feel like he's won that fight because he's been questioned, he's been critiqued, you know, and that's the problem when you're that type of mentality, the perfectionist. So he feel like he's lost that fight. I'm pretty certain, and he needed to get that winning feeling back by knocking whoever he fought out. And if he didn't, get someone else in the summer and do it then, and get that momentum back. So yeah, long time without fighting, and whatever happens in December, he's going to be going into being relatively inactive and coming off in his head, I'm telling you, a defeat. Because in his head, he hasn't won that fight because he hasn't won people back over. And that's what it comes down to.
David, when we look at December, the reports are that there's somewhat of a four-man tournament on the table from Saudi Arabia, which will see Fury Usyk take place, and then Joshua Wilder. Now, obviously, just on the AJ front, if it was to be December, his comeback going into a Deontay Wilder fight, would that be a correct move?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. For the reason I've just said, because he won't have took any confidence out of that win, and he needed to rebuild it because you could see it in his performance, you could see it in his demeanour. He's not a man who's self-assured at the minute, and he needs reassurance. And the best way to do that was to win in style. He didn't. He won't have felt like a victor. Get him another fight. Get him a big win or a big knockout. A bit of a show reel stoppage. Then go into your Wilder fight, because he's the worst opponent Anthony Joshua can face. Because Wilder is the opposite from Joshua when it comes to his demeanour and his mentality. He doesn't care how he looks in the ring. Technically, all he cares about is doing what needs to be done. So he mightn't look as pleasing on the eye as AJ if he's in the pads or in the fight. He mightn't be as correct as him technically, but he's looser and he's freer because he's not second guessing everything and questioning and over-analysing everything. He's not going back to the corner at the end of the round, asking the trainer questions. Where was my hand? What was this? What was that? Just let it flow. Just get in the ring, trust yourself, and do what you've been doing in the gym, but just do it in the ring. You know, so look, it's easy me saying this because I was fucking bad for it. But that's why I know. That's why I know. And I just think Wilder is the worst fella to go straight into a fight after considering the mindset and the demeanour he's shown. Wilder's the wrong fight. Like, but we'll all watch it and it'll be exciting, obviously. But yeah, that I don't think's the right one.
Just a couple more from me, David. Just on the back of this past weekend, looking at what options could be there for Zhang Zhilei. You mentioned Dillian White. A few people have said they wouldn't mind seeing Tyson fight him in the summer. But obviously, we still haven't had some official news as to who Fury will fight now. Obviously, April 29th is not happening. Would you like to see Fury-Zhang?
Yeah, definitely. a fight, I think Fury will just take care of the way he does. You know, it'll just be business as usual. I think probably stop him late on, and then it just flows that he's the Zazzy, isn't he? He's the main man, and that's why, because people lose, he doesn't. He just doesn't. You know, and then the next fella will come through. You think, oh, he's going to be the next this and that, and then someone will they'll slip up, but he just doesn't slip up. Um, and he's too switched on, and he's too comfortable in the ring, and he's just been doing it too long now, and he's just finds a way to win. So yeah, I think it's a good fight, and I think it's a fight they'll like. The Furies, I think they'll say, yeah, good. I think they like Joe Joyce, but I think last night they're going, yeah, we prefer Zhang over Joyce, because Joyce probably a more physically difficult fight for Fury. With the southpaw, it can be more of a boxing match, you know, fighting, switching. You know, it won't be like I said when I thought Joyce and Fury, if they fought each other, it'd take years off the career, because no one would be able to quit. I think with Zhang, it'll be more of a tactical fight, and why not do it in the summer?
David, one thing which we haven't touched on in is it's a couple of weeks ago now again. We saw that Amir Khan had a positive UKAD test. I know we've done a few interviews speaking about fighters who have failed over the years, and most recently, obviously, the kind of Ben stuff still being a hot topic. But when you see what happened with Amir Khan, what was your reaction, your thoughts on everything which has happened around him?
The same as normal. Nothing surprises me when I see it now. I'm just like, oh, again, yeah, just, I don't know what to say about that, Andy. It's just, I've seen him post a couple of things like saying it's been cleared, and, you know, no one ever knowingly takes it. And I always just go, I don't believe they would have knowingly taken it, but people do. Yeah, it's just another stain on boxing, really, isn't it? No matter um, what the outcome is, whether it was innocent or what, it doesn't look good on boxing, especially because of the danger it carries in its own right without drugs being involved. You know, for an outsider looking in, it must be like, fucking hell, why would anyone want to endanger someone's lives even more by juicing? And Amir Khan, you know, one point was the nation's darling. It doesn't look good for him, and he'll be gutted. But I just don't know how these things end up into an athlete's body when they've done it for so long under strict drug testing protocols. End of his career. How's that happened? It's bizarre. Was it UKAD who he got triggered by? Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I hope it isn't true anyway. I like him here. Known him since he was 16 or something. And he's had a fantastic career. So it'd be a shame if that was how he was to finish his career, to be remembered. But like anything, you know, it's old news next week. I'd forgot it had happened until you mentioned it. But you know, it doesn't look good.
It only just popped into my mind right at the end there, David. And just the final one before I let you go, obviously next weekend we have a huge fight stateside, Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. Just your final thoughts on it before it comes around. Who's coming out on top?
Yeah, I think this fight, it's gonna, you know, both are fantastic punches, explosive. You know, it's these are the type of fights you want to see, and I haven't seen a big fight like this at the lower weights for a while. You know, two spectacular big names, massive followings. This fight's about who can take the most rather than give the most, and I think that man's going to be Tank. I just think he'll get to Garcia late on. Might even go find himself on the canvas at one point, but I think he'll get to Garcia late on. But that's a great fight. These are the ones you want to see. These are like you know, like a bit of a throwback fight to like the early 2000s. You know, the big fights at that time. Is the title on the line?
No.
there's no title on, so non-title fight with such a massive attraction. You know, it is. It's good to see. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Tank with that one. What are you thinking?
I like to try and stay neutral, David. It is difficult. I like most. I lean towards Tank. I think at some point he will catch Ryan as well. But it's certainly going to keep everybody on the edge of their seats for however long it lasts, no matter what.
Brilliant fight. Brilliant fight. Yeah, look
But
forward.
right, David, I've taken enough of your time this
See you
evening. It's
next
been
time,
a
then, mate.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you for speaking to me, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Andy. See you soon.